So some of the core tenets that we were working with Black Ops 2 is we really wanted to push the boundaries in pretty much every front that we could on Call of Duty. So whether it was the campaign or the multiplayer or the zombies mode, we wanted to bring new experiences and new gameplay to Call of Duty players. So the story in Black Ops 2 is a direct sequel to Black Ops 1, which means that the characters that you played in Black Ops 1, Mason, and you played with Woods and your CIA handler Hudson, they're coming back in Black Ops 2. But the thing about Black Ops 2 is that it spans time and it spans generations. And while part of the game takes place in the first Cold War, towards the end of that period in the 1980s, late 80s, the other part, almost 2/3 of the game, takes place in the year 2025. And when you talk about, 2025 and you talk about Black Ops with, sort of the historical settings and the authenticity that we try and create, and then we weave our storyline and our fiction through that, that brings up a lot of questions about what is the year 2025 all about. And we did research on that, working with experts like Peter Singer, who's a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, to help us craft a plausible near future scenario where there is a second Cold War. So you have these parallel Cold Wars going on, and what you have is this villain, and he is at the center of this story. And in the first Cold War, as you play through the eyes of the characters that you played in the first Black Ops, you'll see how this villain's motivations came to being, how the monster was created. From the very beginning, we were working with David Goyer. So our director, Dave Anthony, and David Goyer were finishing up Black Ops, and while we were in submission, they were just really excited about what we had created with Black Ops and that fiction that we created and the characters, and there were a lot of stories left untold from that tale, as you know, if you played Black Ops and you watched it all the way through. They started conceiving what they would do with Black Ops 2, and David Goyer, for those of you who don't know him, he is the writer behind The Dark Knight. He created Heath Ledger's Joker, and one of the things they really wanted to do was to be able to not only tell this epic story inside of Black Ops 2 and tell those, the adventures of those characters as they continue to live on, but they wanted to create a three-dimensional villain inside of a Call of Duty game. And they were kind of fascinated with that challenge, and they really wanted to have that character be at the center of this conflict inside of Black Ops 2. And what you'll see is that this villain is literally behind what's going on in this second Cold War as the game plays out.
What happens when the enemy steals the keys?
So for the very first time inside of a Call of Duty game, we wanted to introduce branching story paths. It plays out on multiple levels in the game. So as you're playing through, some of the choices that you make will have an impact, and it'll be done Call of Duty style, right? You'll be in the middle of it, and it'll be intense, and we're not going to pop up an A or B choice for you on the screen. You're going to have to make a choice right there, and depending upon what choices you make, it could have serious implications on the storyline. It could have serious implications on the hero, on your squad mates. It could have implications on the villain, on his henchmen. There's really multiple story arcs that are going inside of Call of Duty Black Ops, and your choices can affect the outcome of how those are going. So at the end of the game, you'll see how some of your choices have played out, and there are multiple endings. What we did is we wanted to create an entirely new mode. We wanted to introduce non-linear campaign structure. We wanted to introduce sandbox gameplay, things that we wanted to bring to the Call of Duty campaign experience, in addition to sort of that epic and cinematic campaign experience that people have come to expect that we're going to deliver with them in a Call of Duty game. And so with Strike Force modes, there are going to be these conflicts they're going on in the world, and you're going to get the lay of the land, and you're going to hear about these proxy wars that are going on, and you're going to go in with one of your Black Ops teams to take them on. And everything about it is non-linear, so you'll have a choice of which of these Strike Force missions you can take. As you choose them, you can either succeed or you can fail, and the story will progress from there. Now, of course, if you want to go back and replay it, if you failed and you want to succeed, you can do that as well, of course. And if you want to go back and play some of the other ones, you can do that as well. But the campaign itself, the story will just progress as if you were playing another story mission, right? So it's part of that overall story. Now, on pretty much every level, it's different. So the gameplay is also different. I mentioned that it's sandbox gameplay. So when you get dropped in with your squad, you're going to be dropped in with the tools and the toys of the future, right? So all the drones. So you'll have quads that you can fly. You'll have automated sentry drones on the ground. You'll have our cognitive land assault weapon, which is sort of a quadped, sort of giant tank with some heavy caliber machinery on it. And you'll be able to take over any of those and play any of those at any time while you're playing a Strike Force level. You'll be able to move between different squad members. You'll be able to play the general on the battlefield. You can play from a tactical position. You can play the whole level from a tactical position. You can play it if you just like playing Call of Duty with the gun in your hand, you don't want to do any of the flying or the driving or the tactical, you can do that too. You can play it any way you want, and it'll play out differently. You can take on the objectives in whatever order you want on those levels. So it's sort of a, it's a great way for people to experience the campaign in an entirely different way than they've ever had with Call of Duty. We want to blow you guys away each and every time we make one of these games. But we also want to introduce some of these non-linear components and new campaign structure and introduce new gameplay in a way that may or may not make sense inside of sort of a more scripted cinematic experience. And so within the fiction, there's clearly this Cold War that's going on, this second Cold War in the future, and it makes sense that there'll be other things that'll be going on in the world, other hotspots where the black operations are going. And these are those missions that you get to play. And of course, as you're playing those will have an impact on the overarching Cold War, much like you would expect a conflict would. So it fits in nicely, but it also allows us the flexibility to be able to introduce all kinds of new gameplay and new gameplay structures to Call of Duty.
They'll always need men like us, those who are willing to do.
So with the new future time frame, it's a little more than 10 years out, right? Year 2025. I think it conjures up all kinds of imagery of what this is, but make no mistake, this is Call of Duty, and it has to be grounded. The kinds of things that are going to be available to the soldiers in the battlefields of the future are going to be things that we might even have a hard time comprehending today. But make no mistake, they're either on the boards, drawing board at DARPA, or they exist in some other format. And as technology progresses, they'll become available on the battlefield. And you're going to have a lot of new tools and weaponry at your disposal. One of the weapons I shared with you in the level was a sniper rifle that had a couple of new features that you've never seen in a Call of Duty game. So one of the features is an optic that uses this millimeter wave technology that exists out there in the world. Now, it's in fairly large format, and it's not anything that you could even remotely consider fitting on an optic. But if you think about 12 years out or so, or 13 years out or so, you could see how that form factor could get smaller. And what does that allow us to do as game designers? Well, that now allows us to see players through certain objects and so forth, so campers beware. But that's only good if you have a way to penetrate some of those objects. And so how do we come up with the fiction for that, a plausible fiction for that? Well, there is technology out there where you have these electronic charges that can fire off lots of bullets, right? So that could penetrate deeper. So you apply that technology to a sniper rifle. Of course, it's a game balance thing because then it's suddenly a very powerful weapon, but you have to hold down and charge up that sniper rifle and get enough caliber weaponry behind it to impact the surface so that you can penetrate what you're seeing behind it. In Los Angeles, there's a sequence where you're going to come upon a VTOL that you can actually take over and fly. So you're going to be flying it through Los Angeles, and you're going to be taking out the enemy. And at some point, you're going to take off in that VTOL and fly it. But not only just fly it, you're going to be using all the caliber weaponry on it. You're going to be launching missiles and firing the high round caliber machine guns that are attached to it. So you're not just targeting and shooting at something, you're also flying it, but it's done Call of Duty style. It's not a simulation. So you guys should be able to, if you know how to play Call of Duty, you're not going to have a problem piloting these futuristic advanced warfighters. You're going to be able to get right into them, and it's pretty epic. It feels very very intense when you're in there. We have effects and explosions. It's really intense experience. We know that there are people who, aren't hardcore, and we know that we have really hardcore fans that we both have to please. So I think, the key to that is when you're making a design is to make it both accessible but have depth of gameplay and strategy for people, so that it's both accessible, which I think regardless of how experienced of a gamer you are, you can appreciate that something is just accessible and easy to pick up and play. But if it has depth inside the gameplay and there's different strategies that you can take to take on your objectives, I think people who are very experienced really appreciate that, and they're sort of rewarded for their expertise. We're not talking about giving you all the details on multiplayer right now, but suffice to say the team is really pushing on it. We've taken a really good look at pretty much every single one of our systems. We've stripped them down and we're building them back up, whether it's the create a class systems or other systems in the game. We're taking a look at those things, and it'll become more clear and more apparent as we show you what we mean when we reveal multiplayer. We're also looking at a lot of things that are going out in the world, around the world of multiplayer and online. So all the social that's going on in the world, we see what's happening on the esports scene, and we really are looking at those and seeing how we can better support that inside of Call of Duty. We're participating in those experiences, and it's having an influence on us. So a lot of exciting stuff to share with you guys in multiplayer a little bit later. So Zombies is coming back, and it's coming back in the biggest and most ambitious way that we've ever done. So this is Treyarch's co-op. Of course, you can play it solo play, but Zombies is really fun when you're playing it with a lot of people. And so Zombies is a full game mode. It's totally separate and distinct from the campaign and multiplayer. The game really is that 3 games in 1 experience. And what you can expect with Zombies is that the team is looking at creating an entirely new sort of robust world. You're going to see some new characters in there, and we're just going to keep building on that. So I can't get into too much detail again, but you're going to see a very ambitious effort on the Zombies front. So if you're a Zombies fan, you're going to be really happy with what we're doing with Black Ops 2. There's been a lot of great Call of Duty games, and I think one of the things that makes Call of Duty so fun to play, especially online, is when you got that 60 frames per second. The controller feels, you feel very connected for what you're playing to what's going on the screen. And one of the things that the team really challenged itself was it really wanted to push the limits of graphic and visual fidelity in this generation of console hardware without sacrificing that 60 frames per second. So towards that end, we've had a graphics overhaul of our engine, a new lighting system. So while there's a lot of new technology that's helping us achieve that new visual fidelity and that leap in visuals that players are going to experience, there's also a lot of tools and artistic techniques. Our artists have been working in this generation of console and this engine for a long time, and they've developed their tools and their techniques, and they're just, we have entirely new techniques of allowing us to make these worlds look more rich, have more diversity, have more effects, at greater resolution. There's just a whole lot more going on inside the worlds that we're creating now, and I think the fans are going to be excited when they finally get to see it. So we have a really ambitious PC effort with Call of Duty Black Ops 2. We've been continuing to push to support Black Ops, and we've learned a lot about what's going on in the PC world. And I think PC players are going to be really excited to see the kind of online work that we're doing. So, for example, the team has been working ever since Black Ops on advanced anti-hack techniques, anti-cheat techniques, which are so important, keeping the online game, fun to play. And you're going to get to see some of those rolled out inside of Black Ops 2. The game looks spectacular. Of course, if you're playing it on the PC, you can go to higher resolutions. If you've invested in your rig, there's going to be a payoff there too. So if you have DX11, you're going to be able to get the benefits of that. But it'll also scale down and look really great on lower pieces of hardware. So, we're doing a lot more in this game, so there is going to be a little bump up in that minimum spec, and while we're not announcing what that is, there's a little bit of a bump there, but you're going to get a lot for that, and there's still just a tremendous range of PCs that this is going to play on. We've seen a lot of configurations out there in the world with Black Ops, and one of the great things about Black Ops is as popular as it was, it really exposed us to, a myriad of configurations.